Hello, everybody. Thanks for clicking on the video. I wanted to do a video just to explain the inpatient CDI workflow because you have a lot of nurses who are interested in working in CDI, but they're not really sure what a CDI specialist does. So I have a little presentation. I put together what my typical workflow was. And I'm going to do another video for outpatient CDI. This is specifically for inpatient CDI. So let's get started. So typically, when you come in, when you start your day, I worked 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. So when you come in, the first thing you do is you want to check for query responses from the doctors if you have sent any queries. And you also want to check for secure chat messages from coders or even from other coworkers or just whomever is needing additional information. So you check that first. And the reason why you want to check that first is because when you have query responses, depending on the type of query you send, the claim is not sent out. So if that is the case, then the claim is being held up until the provider responds. And even if the claim is not held up and it was already sent out for processing, if there is a change in a diagnosis which can affect the DRG and the claim needs to be rebilled, you want that to be done as soon as possible. And you also want to check for any kind of chat messages because those are usually from provider or usually from coders who are trying to get a claim out. So they may need additional information. They may need you to send a query. So you would want to tackle that early in the morning to just make sure that any of that is handled and you already have a clear view of what you have going on in the back. So then after that, you want to work the unassigned work queue, which is new cases. And Monday is going to be the busiest day for new cases as you configure, as you can imagine, because if you just imagine you get off work on Friday at 5 o'clock, the hospital is not going to stop admitting people. People are not going to stop having medical emergencies. So you have Friday afternoon, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and most of Monday, because you figure by the time you get to that, it might be like now, 8:45, 9 o'clock in the morning. So you had people who were even put in observation and they were decided their status changed and they needed to be placed in inpatient. So you have all those people who are waiting in these new queues for someone from CDI to assign the case. So since there's so many cases on a Monday, because I'll talk about that on the next slide, but since there are so many new cases on a Monday, you will not be able to do a thorough review, even though probably at that point you have, depending on who it is, you may have 4 days worth of notes to review, but you only have to what I did for my workflow is I just read through enough just to get an idea of what was going on in order for me to assign a working DRG. Then I would just schedule those for review for the next day. They will move because once you assign a case to yourself and you establish a working DRG, from then on, it becomes a re-review. So which leads me to, then you work your re-review queue cases, and those are cases that you've already assigned to yourself that were unassigned previously. So those, I would usually do mine every other day. Typically every other day. Now, that's a caveat because if you're reading in the notes and you see that someone needs to go and have a colonoscopy or they may need to have a surgery, that person, I will schedule a re-review the day after their surgery. And re-reviews are typically done in the late morning, early afternoon, because as we know, most doctors will see a patient in the morning, so you have a note. You would have a note to re-review, and especially if someone has a surgery, they have a surgery on Monday, you definitely know Tuesday morning, everybody's going to be there to see them. So by the time you get to the re-review Tuesday afternoon, you have enough notes to see how they're doing post-op. You can have it, you have a chance to read the nurse's notes to see if they have any kind of, like, if there's any kind of like complications, or sometimes they may have to go back to surgery, but you would already have that information available for your re-review. So until that person becomes stable, I would just look at them every day. Then once they become stable, then you can go to an every other day. So if it's an every other day and nothing's changed, I would just reschedule that person for 2 days later. Then the last step is called chart reconciliation. That's how you close out the case. So once once the person is discharged, CDI is done with the case. So by that time, you should have all your queries answered. You should already know and have established a firm, fully supported DRG. So by the time it goes to the coding department, in a perfect world, it should be done. All coding has to do is read through any queries that you sent out. If they have any questions, any kind of query responses, they should be able to read through to see, okay, well, this is what the doctor says, so I have to code this, I can code that. So in a perfect world, when you go to your reconciliation queue, you should see optimal selection. So optimal selection means that CDI and coding agree. If CDI and coding disagree, then coding will send what they call a DRG mismatch. Then you have to talk to the coder to figure out what the discrepancy is, and then you may have to send a query, or they may have missed something, or you may have missed something. So then when you close out the reconciliation, that is how you remove the person from your queue altogether. And reconciliation, depending on how many people you have, takes, maybe in a perfect world, once again, because everybody should match up, it should take you like maybe 15 minutes. And chart reconciliation doesn't have to be done every day. I would do mine maybe like twice a week. Then, if time allows, you work other work queues based on necessity. So, with what that means is once you finish your initial, like, you go to your new cases and you do your re-reviews, sometimes you have time left over, so they have other work queues. Like, you have people who may have come in and out. They may have only been like a 2-day stay, or maybe a 3-day stay, and their 3 days hit at a time where no one was able to pick up their no CDI specialist was able to pick up that claim. So they have a discharge with no CDI review queue. So you would go through, pick cases, and you would just work through to see if there's any query opportunities, and make sure that the diagnosis that was submitted by coding is fully supported. Because you may go through and you may see, oh, well, I could query for such and such would, and if the query comes back whatever, then that can affect the DRG, and the claim may need to be rebuilt. And a lot of times in those short lengths of stay cases, you can find query opportunities. So that's why they have a whole separate queue for CDI to work through. Now, in addition, even if, because I was assigned, where I worked, I was assigned to one hospital for this particular client, but this client had a bunch of hospitals. So you may have a home hospital, but sometimes, depending on census or depending on need, that you may need to be pulled to another facility. You work it the exact same way. You go through the new review first. Everybody starts off new. They start off unassigned because you go to the unassigned work queue. Then once you assign it to yourself and you assign a working DRG and you work through, then it becomes yours. Then you have to do follow-up. So whether it's your home hospital or not, you still work it the same way. You still do your re-reviews, you still do any kind of query, you still send queries, and you still do reconciliation. So that basically is a brief. I didn't want this video to be too long, but I really did want to explain the CDI, the inpatient CDI workflow for people who are considering an opportunity in CDI. And if you want to find out more information, there's my email address, and you can also visit my website, www.thecodingnurse.com. Thanks, and have a great day.